Sometimes all it takes is a single name spoken at the right moment to shake an entire market. John Deere, that name, once stood as a symbol of American pride, a badge of honor stretched across the vast fields from Iowa to Kansas, where every engine roar echoed with the sweat and hope of the American farmer. But then came a brief announcement from the company. They were moving their production line to Mexico. No elaborate explanation, no promises. And then someone else, Donald Trump, stepped onto the stage with that familiar voice. If you do that, I'll slap a 200% tariff on every product you import into the US. That threat wasn't just campaign rhetoric. It was a match tossed into a powder keg that had been quietly smoldering for years, a war between loyalty and profit, between voter emotion and the reality of a global economy. Trump didn't choose just anywhere to make that statement. He chose Iowa, not only because it's an agricultural stronghold, but because it's sacred ground for John Deere, where nearly every family has at some point operated one of those iconic green tractors. Trump knew that here, if he said out loud what people were already thinking but didn't dare say, he would win. And that's exactly what he did. He didn't just go after Deere, he struck at the emotional core of America's farming class. People who once believed that America was the center of the world and that their work was irreplaceable. To Trump, John Deere's actions were nothing short of a betrayal, a knife in the back of the nation. And he vowed retaliation, not just with words, but with policy. That wave spread faster than anyone expected, through the media, across Wall Street, into every campaign rally hall. But beneath all the shouting and the outrage, a quieter question began to echo. Why did John Deere do it? Was it a betrayal of their country? Or was it simply a necessary move in a world where labor costs, logistics speed, and the pressure of globalization spare no one? To truly understand, we need to pull back the curtain on Mexico, a place not only watched by John Deere, but by hundreds of other corporations eyeing the land beyond the southern border, a place where opportunity and controversy walk hand in hand like two sides of the same coin. To many Americans, Mexico was once the embodiment of job loss, a name synonymous with uncertainty and decline. But to the senior executives at John Deere, Mexico wasn't an adversary. It was a solution, an escape, a lifeline. Behind the decision to shift part of their production line south wasn't just a spreadsheet filled with cold, calculated numbers. It was the result of months of data analysis, private consultations with supply chain experts, infrastructure surveys, shipping route calculations, and trade-offs weighed down to the last decimal point of profit margin. Labor costs in the US have surged, now 1.5 times higher than just a decade ago. Worker protection laws have lengthened training periods and piled on regulatory compliance costs. At the same time, the domestic logistics system has become increasingly unstable, plagued by container shortages and a lack of truck drivers. And looming large on the horizon are global competitors. Mahindra from India, Kubota from Japan, offering lower prices and blazing fast innovation cycles. John Deere was running out of options. Clinging to aging factories in the Midwest would only mean falling further behind. Mexico, in contrast, had everything they needed: a young labor force, up to 70% lower costs, close proximity to fast-growing markets like Brazil and Colombia, favorable trade agreements, and above all, a booming manufacturing ecosystem fueled by the post-COVID wave of nearshoring. Building a modern facility in Monterrey wasn't an escape, it was a strategic adaptation. A calculated move that allowed John Deere to maintain US operations while staying agile in a global economy. But no matter how rational the move, emotion is harder to silence. And once wounded, emotion is hard to heal. For many Americans, especially those in the industrial heartland, they didn't see the internal data or the logistics spreadsheets. All they saw was this: a company they once took pride in was leaving them behind, choosing Mexico over home. And into that void of anger stepped Donald Trump. No PowerPoint, no charts, just a single sentence to ignite the flame of populism. Deere betrayed you, and I will punish them for it. Politics, in his hands, wasn't just a tool. It was a weapon, and the counterattack began right where the symbol had been wounded the most. Donald Trump didn't need a risk analysis report. He didn't need to understand the intricacies of global supply chains or why an American company might have to produce overseas just to survive. All he needed was to feel the simmering anger within the working class and he struck that nerve perfectly. To Trump, politics wasn't the art of compromise. It was the art of emotion, of confrontation, of turning an economic decision into a symbol of betrayal and using it to ignite a flame of support from those who felt abandoned in their own country. He stood on the prairies of Iowa without a script, without technical projections. He spoke briefly, bluntly, and directly to what people wanted to hear. We cannot let them ship jobs overseas and still profit here. I will place a 200% tariff on everything they bring in from Mexico. The crowd erupted. American flags waved, and men and women in work shirts and red Make America Great Again hats nodded in satisfied agreement. For Trump, this was a chance to reassert identity. In a world increasingly driven by globalization, where low cost and speed often win, he sought to redefine what economic loyalty means. Not profit optimization, but preserving American values. John Deere, in his eyes, wasn't just a company. It was a symbol that had forgotten its roots, that had chosen profit over honor. And he, like an angry father, didn't hesitate to punish the wayward child with heavy-handed policy. What's notable is Trump wasn't alone. The red states, Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, places where every bolt and gear of a tractor is tied to a deep pride in farming, were boiling over. Internal polling showed that for every one person who opposed the tariffs, 2 others supported them. Not because they didn't understand Deere's reasons, but because they were exhausted from feeling replaceable, forgotten in a game they once led. But while politics moves on emotion, the market runs on logic. As Trump stirred a storm of outrage on the ground, high up in the glass towers of Wall Street, investors were seeing things differently. They didn't care about slogans, they cared about profit trends, growth in Latin America, and global adaptability. And they knew John Deere wasn't stepping back, they were stepping ahead, a calculated move, even if unpopular with the crowd. But can market logic hold firm against a political firestorm? That question quickly jumped from the trading floor to Capitol Hill, where every decision can suddenly be swayed not just by numbers, but by votes. John Deere didn't stay silent, they didn't apologize, and they didn't back away. In a short but firm statement, the company's representative asserted less than 5% of production was being moved overseas, and the core product lines, tractors, harvesters, control systems, were still being manufactured right here in the US. They called it a balanced strategy, not a retreat, an expansion, not an abandonment. But that did little to cool the fury, because in politics, sometimes a cracked symbol wounds more deeply than a distorted truth. Congress jumped in immediately. Republican lawmakers, traditionally allies of big business, suddenly became the loudest voices of criticism. Ironically, they weren't just defending Donald Trump, they were defending the outrage of their constituents. Some called for emergency hearings on companies receiving federal support while offshoring production. The Department of Agriculture put a pause on the renewal of certain supply contracts. State governments began reevaluating tax incentives given to Deere. The political climate ignited, as if this were a direct challenge to the entire value system of America First. And yet, while lawmakers clashed on TV and heated hearings began to unfold in Washington, over in New York, Wall Street remained calm, like water before the storm. After an initial dip in Deere's stock price, the market quickly bounced back. Analysts weren't looking at Iowa or Ohio, they were looking at Brazil, Argentina, Indonesia, where demand for agricultural machinery is booming. They were looking at logistics costs dropping nearly 30% thanks to new warehouse networks in northern Mexico. They were looking at John Deere's rapid growth in agri-tech, AI, drones, automation. And they knew, in the long game, Deere was playing a high-stakes strategy, one where victory wouldn't be measured in emotions, but in profitability over the next decade. But while Wall Street stayed calm and Congress roared, in the middle stood the people, the American farmers, the ones who didn't just use Deere machines as tools, but as part of their lives, the ones who'd grown used to that green and yellow paint, to the soft hum of engines in the early morning of harvest season. To them, this wasn't just a story about a company and a politician. This was about them, about every decision, every dollar, every crop. And the most unsettling part was, they no longer knew who to believe. From the wheat fields of Nebraska to the sprawling corn farms of Iowa, American farmers don't say much. They listen, they watch, and they can feel clearly that this time the battle isn't happening somewhere far away. It's unfolding right here on their own land. They hear Trump speak and they nod because he puts words to their pain. Jobs slowly disappearing, costs rising, and a growing sense of being forgotten. But at the same time, they see the new machines from John Deere, lighter, faster, more precise, using less fuel and controllable remotely from a phone app. They don't want to lose jobs, but they also can't ignore the efficiency and benefits that this new technology brings. On agricultural forums, quiet debates have rumbled for weeks. One side defends Deere. Without them, how would we ever plant and harvest on time? The other side's with Trump. If an American company won't keep American jobs, that's betrayal. Local radio stations have become battlegrounds for clashing opinions. And out in the fields, after switching off the combine, farmers sit quietly on their porches, thinking about what lies ahead. They're being pulled between two poles: the emotion of being a patriotic American and the logic of being a farm owner trying to survive in a rapidly shifting market. To them, John Deere isn't just a name. It's memory. It's present. It's the dream they've been building for the next generation. But now that dream is changing. They no longer pass down the know-how of driving a tractor, but teach how to program an irrigation system. No more early mornings pouring engine oil. Now it's evenings spent checking yield data from cloud-based software. And the old world, where everything revolved around manual labor, is fading faster than they ever expected. They haven't said it out loud, but deep down, they know. The one truly changing the game isn't Trump. It isn't even Deere. It's what's quietly entering every field, every barn, every tractor, tireless, unrelenting, and needing no sympathy. It's technology, it's automation, and once it arrives, there's no going back. While politicians argue over tariffs and TV pundits debate patriotism and corporate responsibility, out on the vast fields of America, a quiet revolution is underway, deeper and more profound than any rallying cry. It's the revolution of automation. John Deere understands this, perhaps better than those criticizing them, because they're not just building machines, they're reshaping what farming even means. On select pilot farms, farmers no longer step into the fields at dawn. They open a tablet, connect to the cloud, check moisture levels, fertilizer metrics, and tractor positions, all pre-programmed. Driverless tractors start up remotely, follow precise GPS routes, and even avoid ground-level bird nests. Drones soar through the air, spraying pesticides with square-meter accuracy. And AI, built from Deere's own algorithms, adjusts irrigation based on weather forecasts, soil types, even the disease resistance of specific crop varieties. In this new world, workers don't need to steer. They need to code, interpret data, understand machine learning. Farming no longer means mud-caked boots and calloused hands. It becomes the profession of those who can harness technology. And in that world, the location of a factory, Mexico or the US, is no longer the central question. What matters is who can innovate faster, better, more efficiently. That's why Deere isn't panicking over political threats, because they know the real battle isn't at the national border, it's in the race to adapt to the future. They're pouring hundreds of millions into AI research, autonomous agri-robots, smart sensors. They're partnering with Silicon Valley startups, and they're transforming themselves from a machinery manufacturer into a global agri-tech powerhouse. Of course, not everyone is ready. Many farmers are still trying to catch up. Some feel left behind. But time doesn't wait. An autonomous tractor doesn't care about being insulted. It just works. Precisely, consistently, efficiently. And in an economy where productivity means survival, the only thing that matters isn't the flag flying on the hood, but the data glowing on the screen. And so while the debate over John Deere and Mexico remains unresolved, another battle, quieter but far more decisive, is reshaping the entire story. This battle doesn't unfold at rallies, it lives in lines of code. It's not broadcast on cable news, but it will determine who truly survives in the modern economy. It's a clash between two visions. On one side, the past, emotional, proud, filled with memories of golden days. On the other, the future, cold, calculated, with no room for nostalgia. And when these two worlds collide, politics and technology, we're not just witnessing a public debate. We're watching a civilizational shift unfold. Donald Trump doesn't talk about AI chips. He doesn't care much about the operating systems running the fields of Nebraska. What he cares about is the anger of those who feel betrayed, and he has learned to wield that anger like a blade. To him, a great America is the America of the 1950s, where factories rang with the sound of hammers, where workers walked tall after their shifts, and where national pride was sewn into every Made in USA label. He doesn't speak of the future, he invokes the past. A past beautiful enough that many long to return to it, even if they know they never can. But John Deere is different. They don't say much, they don't campaign, they don't knock on doors asking for votes. They quietly redraw the map of agriculture with GPS tracks, optimization algorithms, and robotic arms that never tire. To them, emotion can't be measured, but data can, and it can be trusted. They don't race for sound bites. They race against time. They don't seek support through flags, but through production efficiency and net profits. And then those two worlds collide. One is politics, where every declaration is wrapped in symbolism, where decisions shift with the winds of public opinion. The other is technology, where every breakthrough stems from logic, from calculation, from adapting to a constantly changing market. One calls for preserving what was. The other urges breaking the old to build what's better. One speaks of loyalty, the other speaks of competitiveness, and both believe they're right. But the irony is this: both worlds need each other. Technology cannot win hearts without trust. Politics cannot hold voters without reality. And in that space between them stand real people, farmers, workers, investors, forced to choose between emotion and reason, between the familiar and the uncertain, between an America that once was and an America that is still being formed. The battle between politics and technology has no gunfire, but it will define the direction of a nation. And in this civilizational clash, it's not the loudest voice that wins. It's the one who sees further, understands deeper, and dares to step across the line of habit to embrace a world not everyone is ready for. The battle between Trump and John Deere, at first glance, might seem like a showdown between a politician and a corporation. But in truth, it's a mirror, reflecting the society we live in. On one side stands the old American dream, worn but full of feeling, where values are shaped by blood, sweat, and loyalty. On the other side is the inescapable reality of the 21st century, where technology leads the way, data speaks, and every decision is influenced by lines of cold, calculated code. Trump is betting that the people will stand with him on the side of justice, fighting back against the companies he claims have abandoned their country. Deere is betting that the market will reward long-term vision, that efficiency, innovation, and global competitiveness will ultimately shape the future. But the ones who will truly bear the cost are us. We, the consumers, the voters, the everyday people, who must choose between a trusted old machine and a new, unfamiliar technology, between faith in leadership and trust in algorithms, between the emotion of the past and the calculation of the future. We'll pay the price if we keep arguing but take no action, if we pick sides out of habit, nostalgia, or fear of change. Because the truth is, the world doesn't wait. The driverless tractors keep rolling, every minute, every second. Other nations are still moving forward, step by step. And if we don't dare to ask questions, if we don't look beyond our immediate anger, the real cost may not be today's vote, but tomorrow's irrelevance. So in the end, the question isn't whether Trump wins or Deere wins. It's whether we can adapt, whether we're willing to face a world where everything is changing, not just in terms of technology, but in how we understand ourselves, our roles, and our place in the global story. If you've listened this far, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do you stand in this debate? Do you choose to protect what's familiar, or are you ready to embrace what's coming? And do you believe that even without a heart, technology might just be what saves the future? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you stories that are deeper, more nuanced, and truly thought-provoking. Because in a world where everyone's talking, your willingness to listen means more than you think. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.